bag was warm by the time I touched it. Synthetic heat, insulated pouch, the smell leaking faintly through the seam. Iron-rich. High quality, no clotting, and human. I sat in the limo the outfit sent for me. Its interior was soundless aside from the low hum of tires on asphalt and the quiet drip of blood against my tongue as I drank. No windows. Bulletproof glass separated me from the driver. Black leather seats that hadn't seen sunlight in years. The voice came through the hidden speakers after 30 silent minutes. No greeting, no pleasantries, just business. Operatives inserted 2 days ago. 5-man unit. Direct government authorization. Objective: investigate and terminate hostile cryptid interference reported by a logging firm in northern Colorado. Confirmed to be lupine in nature. Werewolves. Pack behavior. Coordinated attack patterns. 2 survivors remain. Coordinates received. Extraction pending. You will assist and ensure completion. I swallowed another mouthful and licked the edge of the bag, the taste still clinging to my teeth. It was good blood. Casualties? I asked aloud. 3 dead, 2 alive. Hold up in a collapsed mine near the active zone. Werewolves have surrounded the perimeter. GPS interference and magnetic flux indicates supernatural nesting. Conditions unstable. Threat level red. Standard combat protocols. No public exposure tolerated. I stretched my neck. Felt the bones crack down the side. I reached into the gear case beside me and laid out my loadout on the seat beside me like a surgeon preparing for work. 2 pistols, matte black, clean triggers, loaded with silver-jacketed hollow points. 50 rounds, each one packed tight in my vest. No rattle, no slip. I wouldn't use them unless I had to. Noise drew attention and attention got you killed. The knife came next. K-bar style, heavy grip. Silver-lined edge I couldn't touch with my bare skin. It stayed in a custom sheath wrapped in treated leather. Just being near it made my teeth itch. 2 concussive grenades sat snug in a double pocket on the inside of the coat. Not for killing, but for chaos. A sharp blast of sound and pressure. Enough to throw a monster's senses into a tailspin. Finally, the boots. Heavy, thick-soled, reinforced with carbon fiber. At a tap of my heel, the toe would extend a silver blade like a feigned knife. Not elegant, but devastating. You will be dropped 2 kilometers outside the mine perimeter. Insertion is to be silent. Your discretion. And my car? It will be driven manually to the coordinates, delivered prior to extraction window, 5 a.m. I smirked, slow and faint. Good. I like the drive home. The speaker clicked silent again. That was the extent of our conversations. Clean and surgical. Just enough words to grease the gears, never enough to feel human. That's the point. The outfit doesn't have a face. Doesn't want one. Faces are risk. They give me orders, I do the work. It's always been that way. The limo began to slow, the undercarriage groaning as it transitioned from smooth road to loose gravel. I sealed the blood pouch into the disposal chute near the floor, clicked the pistol safeties off, then back on again, muscle memory, always check twice, and the coat came on next. Black duster lined with Kevlar and spell-treated threading. Not enough to stop a direct bite, but it might buy me a second or 2. That's all I ever really need. The limo didn't take me to the drop zone. It took me to the edge of a private airstrip buried somewhere north of nowhere, where a private aircraft waited with engines ready and already warmed and back ramp open like the jaws of some quiet predator. No human crew greeted me. No one handed me a file or gave me a briefing. I boarded alone, sat in the dark, and let the hum of altitude fill the silence. The air dropped me low. Stealth insertion night parachute. Wind slicing through the pines as I dropped through like a needle through fabric. I hit the forest floor hard and fast, boots sinking into the snow, parachute already dissolving behind me in a hiss of synthetic dust and static. And just like that, I was there. Somewhere beyond the tree line, a howl broke through the silence. Long and deep, not lonely. It wasn't calling out, it was hunting. I rolled my shoulders once, felt the familiar shift of weapons resting against my back and thighs, and started walking towards the mine. Time to work. The forest closed in fast. Snow fell in dry, silent flakes, coating the trees in a white crust that softened the world into layers of breath and shadow. The wind hissed gently between the pines, cold and clean, but there were no birds, no branches creaking, no natural signs of life. Just the soft crunch of my boots and the occasional drip of melting snow from above. The mine sat somewhere ahead, 2 kilometers, maybe less. I moved low and quiet, sticking to the undergrowth, senses wide open. The blood I drank in the limo still hummed under my skin like a second heartbeat, but the hunger was already whispering again. I found the first body. It was half buried under a fallen log, torn open from the waist up. No armor left, just muscle, sinew, and shredded gear. Dog tags still caught in the remains of the man's throat. I crouched beside him, picked one up and read the name. Carter. And I remembered the mission brief. He'd been comms lead, good training, special forces, and he never saw it coming. I kept moving. The snow was too clean, too undisturbed, but the silence buzzed like a wound in the world. I followed instinct, not trail, movement, scent, and air pressure. Then I stopped. Something was watching. I turned to my left, eyes narrowing on a cluster of black pines near slope. The shape was barely visible, just a shimmer, the faint rise of breath in the air, one step out of sync with the wind. I stepped forward, slowly and quietly. My right hand hovered above the pistol grip. My fingers twitched once. The wolf moved. It lunged in a flash, a blur of fur and claws, clearing 20 feet in a second. I drew and fired, but it was already on me. The shot caught it in the shoulder, silver burned deep and made it scream, but not enough. The impact slammed me backward into a snow-covered stump hard enough to rattle my spine. I rolled with it, twisting beneath the thing's weight, kicking out with both feet to drive it off of me. The silver tip of my boot connected, slammed into its thigh, and the monster howled, toppling back with a wet crunch. I was up before it hit the ground. Fast, too fast for it to keep up. I was already behind it as I scrambled, and I drove the knife deep into the side of its neck. My hand burned with the nearness of the silver. The wolf thrashed violently, claws lashing wild. One raked across my back and carved through the coat like it was paper. I pulled the blade free and buried it again, lower, deep into its spine. This time it dropped and didn't get up. One down. I kept moving. The forest dipped into a small ravine, thick with roots and icy runoff. Another body face down in the creek. Another soldier. The blood in the water told me he died slow. No weapon, no fight. They were being picked off, hunted. I crouched, scanning the treetops. I didn't hear the next one, I felt it. The sudden shift in the air. Then the impact. The second wolf dropped from above like a boulder, crashing down onto my shoulders, claws tearing from my throat. I twisted and let the force carry us both into a roll and came up in a crouch with my pistol aimed straight up. 2 shots. The first missed. The second didn't. It hit the underside of the jaw, silver cracking through the skull and spraying bone across the snow. The thing collapsed in a heap beside me, convulsing. I drove my knife through the back of its neck anyway, just to be sure. They weren't used to being hunted back. I moved faster now. No more slow stalking. The terrain turned sharp and rocky. A cliff to my right, old logging trail to my left. I cut toward the cliffside, boots crunching, and spotted the third just as it came charging down the slope. This one was huge, taller than the others and broader, covered in black fur matted with blood and ash. It ran on all fours, a blur of muscle and hate, closing the distance in seconds. I didn't run. I couldn't. I couldn't outrun a werewolf. These things were fast. So I baited it. I stood my ground until the last second, then drove sideways, low and fast, rolling through the snow. The wolf overshot, slammed into a tree trunk hard enough to crack bark, and staggered on impact. I was behind it before it turned. My blade flashed and caught its side. It howled and whipped around with both claws. I ducked the first, blocked the second with my forearm, bone cracked, pain shot up my arm, but I kept moving. I got under its swing, jammed the pistol against its ribs, and fired 3 times. All silver, all deep. The monster spasmed and dropped like a bag of meat. My arm wasn't broken, not fully. I'd have to just ignore it for now. 3 down. I didn't stop. I couldn't. Time was burning. I pushed uphill now toward the mine. Another 500 meters or so. The fourth came at me from the left. Flanking maneuver, clever son of a bitch. It grabbed me mid-run, claws sinking into my side, and hurled me against a boulder. The impact crushed the breath out of me. I slid down the rock bleeding. As I leapt, I dove under its claws, spun, and jammed the knife into its stomach. Then I twisted and kept twisting until the blade hit bone. It shrieked, claws flailing. I stepped behind it and slammed it face first into the ground, and then stomped down on its skull with everything I had. It didn't move after that, and the last werewolf didn't attack. It watched. I saw it at the edge of the tree line, a silhouette against the snow, yellow eyes, breathing slow and even. It was studying me, learning. These weren't feral werewolves. Not entirely. There was intelligence behind that gaze. I holstered my pistol and wiped the blade against the coat and stared back. It moved first, a blur, 4-legged sprint. I sidestepped its first swipe and punched it square in the jaw. It barely flinched. It came faster. I ducked and slashed at the knees, caught one. It stumbled, fell, and rolled. It came up snarling. We circled, it lunged, and I went low. My knife flashed. It dodged. Then I kicked out with the silver-toed boot and caught it under the ribs, and heard the scream as silver burned its insides. I didn't wait. I tackled it blade in hand, and we rolled through the snow, slashing and tearing. It bit into my shoulder and I stabbed into its throat. We both screamed. Then it stopped moving. My coat was soaked through. My breath steamed the air. I could barely see through the haze of pain and heat. 5 dead. I looked down the slope and toward the mouth of the mine. The snow around it was red. It was time to go inside. The air inside the mine was still and thick. Every breath came out cold, wet, and metallic. My boots made almost no sound on the frozen dirt, but the quiet still managed to feel loud. The kind of quiet that pushes in from all sides and makes you hear your own blood. No birds, no wind. Just stone and the slow hiss of settling air, heavy with mildew and coal dust. I moved without a flashlight, trusting the night vision edge that came with being what I am. My eyes caught the faint gleam of moisture, the outlines of collapsed beams and rusted track lines, the forgotten skeletons of a once busy world. I could see in the dark just fine. The cold didn't bother me, and neither did the quiet. What did was the echo I kept hearing a little too late, like my steps weren't the only ones. Something else was down here, pacing just out of reach. I passed through narrow service corridors, ducking under sagging ceilings, brushing frost-covered warning signs and ancient spider webs. Every now and then I'd spot a mark, a scuff in the dust, a smear on the wall, a casing on the floor. M16 ammo, military issue. It was clear the squad passed this way, but it wasn't clear if they passed through or got dragged back. After 10 minutes, the mine forked, a left path sloping gently toward storage areas and fuel drums, the right path dropping sharply into the lower hall. That one looked worse. That one felt wrong. So I took it. 50 yards down, I found blood. Not a splash, not a dot, a drag mark. Long and dark, streaked along the wall like something had been pulled backwards. There were handprints, too. Fingers curled, scrapes left behind by boot soles that tried to stop whatever was doing the dragging. The shell casing scattered nearby said someone fought. They just didn't win. No body, no weapon, just silence and red. I crouched next to it. I touched 2 fingers to the blood, still damp. Maybe a couple of hours old, no more. Still fresh enough that whoever lost it was probably still being gnawed on in the dark. I heard the growl before I saw the shape. It was soft, slow, a low, wet rumble like concrete cracking under heat. I turned and stood slowly, hand already tightening on the hilt of the silver-lined K-bar. The tunnel behind me bent just out of view, and then something pulled loose from the shadows. It was big, 7 feet easy, upright, hunched, black, furred, and sinewy. Its head scraped along the tunnel ceiling. Eyes burned faint yellow like old lantern glass. It snarled once and then dropped onto all fours, claws biting into the stone and charged. I moved, sidestepped and ducked as it slashed through the air where I'd been. I didn't shoot, not yet. Sound carried too far in a tomb like this. Instead, I rolled across a narrow path, kicked off the opposite wall, and drove the side of my boot into its knee. The silver spike at the toe caught flesh. It howled and staggered, just enough for me to lunge and ram it chest first into the rock wall. The knife was already pressed to its throat, burning faintly where it touched skin. It thrashed and snarled, eyes locked onto mine. "Talk," I growled. It bared its teeth. "Finger, you reek of the dead," it said in a voice that sounded like cracked granite. "Answer or I'll carve the words out of your lungs," I said, digging the knife a little deeper. "You don't belong down here. You never did," it sneered, wincing as the silver started to sizzle against its throat. "How many of you?" I asked. No bluff, just steel behind my words. Its grin widened. "Too many for you. You think killing a few strays in the woods makes you ready for what lies below?" It shifted slightly, testing its weight. I twisted the blade until steam hissed up between us. It howled in pain, clawed uselessly at the stone, eyes burning now with hate instead of arrogance. "The Alpha's on his way. He'll rip that pretty throat out and use your skull as a cup." I didn't say a word. I just stared into those yellow eyes and shoved the blade up under the sternum and into its heart. It went stiff, trembled, then dropped like a broken engine. I pulled the knife out and wiped it on the inside of my coat and kept moving. If the rest of the pack had a half the bite this one did, the Alpha was going to be a real problem. The tunnel curved again, tighter now, the ceiling dipping in places where the snow melt from above had carved its way down over the years. My boots slid slightly on wet stone. I slowed, head low, every step measured. The hunger was stirring again, not sharp, not desperate, but there. I could feel the burn of the blood I'd used up in the last fight fading. I'd need to be smarter going forward. Less flash, more finish. Eventually, I spotted a faint flicker of light. Too steady for fire, too dull for a working rig. Flashlight. I moved toward it slowly, not wanting to get mistaken for something else. A voice shouted, "Stop right there!" A harsh beam hit my chest. I lifted one hand, knife lowered in the other. "Don't shoot." A second figure moved behind the light. "Identify yourself." "Delta 9. Check your SATCOM logs. I'm your backup." "Bullshit." "Try me." There was a long pause. Then a smaller man stepped into the light, twitchy, hands trembling on his rifle. "It's true," he said, glancing up at the bigger one. "Call sign matches the backup protocol." The larger man lowered the beam slowly. "Sergeant Cole, this is Specialist Navarro. We're what's left." I stepped in, scanning the area. Makeshift barricades of crates and old steel blocking off a narrow hallway. Good fallback point. They'd been holding it for a while. "Status?" Cole held up his left arm, wrapped in gauze and soaked through with red. "Fractured. Maybe broken. No morphine left. We're out of grenades and Navarro's got one mag." "Radio?" "Dead air. I think something's jamming it or chewing through our relays. We've been trapped here since midnight." "You're lucky you're still breathing," I muttered. "No shit," Navarro said too quickly, eyes darting to every shadow. "Thompson got taken 3 hours ago. They dragged him out screaming." Cole gave him a warning look, but Navarro wasn't looking at him. He was looking at me like I was either a hallucination or the second coming of war. "You're really one of them, huh?" "Define them." "You know what I mean." I didn't answer. I crouched down, checked my gear, and nodded once. "We move as one. Tight formation, I lead. You cover. We're pushing to the secondary shaft. We move fast, we stay quiet, and you follow my damn lead." Cole nodded. "Copy." Navarro looked like he was about to puke, but said, "Yeah, okay, got it." I stood, stretched out the tension out of my spine, and pulled my pistol from its holster. "Then let's go," I said, voice flat and quiet. Because this wasn't a rescue anymore. This was going to be a warpath. We moved fast and low through the next corridor, boots barely whispering across the stone. I led, Cole and Navarro close behind, weapons ready but held tight to their chests, eyes scanning every corner. I'd seen enough feral hunts to know the rhythm. The way things go quiet before the strike. This wasn't random. This was surgical and controlled. We paused at an old service alcove, half collapsed under a ceiling beam. I signaled for them to halt, held 2 fingers up and turned to face them. Navarro handed me a radio, barely holding together with a bent antenna and 3 strips of electrical tape keeping the battery in. "Get static at best. You'd have better luck with smoke signals." I passed it back without a word, then dropped my voice low. "Secondary shaft is half a click northeast, near the bottom of the incline. If the tunnels aren't collapsed, we follow the ventilation line until it breaks the surface grade. If they're blocked, then we die in here," Navarro muttered. Cole cut him off with a sharp look, but I stepped between them before the tension snapped. "If they're blocked, I'll clear them. You 2 keep your heads down and listen to my commands. Don't break formation. Don't chase noise. And if I go down, you run. Understood?" Cole gave a tight nod. "Understood." Navarro hesitated, then quietly, "Yeah, got it." I turned back toward the path ahead. The tunnel narrowed as it descended, walls bleeding condensation, the floor a half-frozen slurry of mud and old gravel. Every few steps I caught the smell, fur, blood, and heat. Close. Closer than before. But even with my heightened senses, it was hard to pin them down with all these shafts. They weren't hiding now, they were hurting us. I could feel it in the tremor of the stone. the occasional creak of metal in the dark. They wanted us tired, they wanted us boxed in. We moved deeper into the guts of the mine, ducking under a low passage barely 4 feet high. Navarro cursed under his breath, catching his helmet on a beam. I turned back and motioned for silence just as we cleared the drop and entered a small chamber where the air felt different. My instincts screamed, and before I could say a word, something crashed into Navarro from the side. He flew sideways into the wall, rifle clattering from his hands, breath ripped from his lungs in a sharp cry. The tunnel filled with noise, howling, gunfire, claws scraping stone, and then the second one came. I shoved Cole aside as it lunged. The beast was all speed and weight, but it missed, overshot, and I was on it before it could turn. I drove a shoulder into its flank and shoved it into the wall, and rammed the K-bar up under its ribs. It howled and clawed at me, caught my coat but not flesh. We tumbled together, my feet kicking off the wall, blade digging deeper. Cole opened fire behind me, 3 controlled bursts, then a pause. The chamber echoed like a bomb going off. Stone cracked, dust rained. I caught a glance of Navarro scrambling to his feet. The werewolf beneath me twisted, claws slashing. I dodged one, and caught the second across the thigh, deep, hot and sharp, but I didn't stop. I slammed its skull into the ground, and pinned it there, and yanked the blade sideways through its throat. It spasmed once, then collapsed into a heap of fur and blood. No time to breathe. The second one was already on Cole, snarling, raking claws against his chest plate. He grunted, stumbled back, gun jammed between them. I moved without thinking. 3 steps, a jump, and I kicked hard into the beast's side. It snarled, staggered, and turned on me and lunged again. I ducked under the swipe, drove my shoulder into his knees and twisted. The leg cracked. Bone snapped loud enough to echo. It screamed, trying to bite me, but Cole was already back up, rifle aimed low. "Move!" he shouted. I rolled clear just as he fired. 7 shots center mass. The werewolf shuddered and dropped in a twitching heap, breath gurgling through broken ribs. The silence was deafening. Just the slow drip of blood on stone and that werewolf struggling to breathe. I walked over to it and put my dagger into its heart. It fell silent. Navarro leaned against the wall, a line of blood down one arm, not deep, but enough to make him shake. "You good?" I asked, stepping close. "Yeah, I think." "Good. You can bleed later. Keep moving." I looked to Cole. His face was pale, breathing hard but steady. "Mag's low for both of us. 5 to 6 rounds left." "I'll buy time," I said, wiping the knife clean again. He gave me a look. "You always this calm?" "No, just good at faking it." And then we moved again, deeper into the dark, the scent of blood thick behind us and the Alpha still waiting somewhere ahead. We had to go deeper into the mine. I couldn't take them out the same way I came in because I thought it would be swarming with werewolves by now. The path ahead sloped unevenly, and the old wooden supports overhead looked like they'd collapse if something sneezed too hard. Cole's shoulder light was barely hanging on, throwing a jittery cone of illumination that shook with every breath he took. Navarro's helmet beam was aimed too high and too weak, casting shadows across the walls, warping the space in front of us into a twitching mess of flickers. They were walking through a horror show and they couldn't even see straight. But I could. The darkness bent to me. I didn't need light. I saw the veins in the stone, the cracks in the support beams, the twitch of movement 200 feet ahead that hadn't even made a sound yet. And even if I couldn't see, I could still hear every shift of weight, every scrape of claw, every heartbeat not my own. Something was following. I could feel it now, the same way you feel a thunderstorm before it hits. The air had a charge, and it wasn't just tension, it was a warning. I turned a corner and paused. The path split ahead around a collapsed tunnel, and a cracked steel door leaned against the wall like it had been wrenched off its hinges. I crouched, ran my fingers across the dirt. Prints. Fresh. 5 toes. Elongated heel. Weight bearing. Wolves. 2 of them, maybe more. I stood and looked back at Cole. We're coming up on a bottleneck. Get ready. He nodded, jaw tight, eyes sunken with exhaustion. Navarro, who was the sergeant, was pale and twitchy, but holding it together through sheer panic. Cole's light began to sputter, shorting out in rapid bursts, the cone of light pulsing like a dying heartbeat. I saw his hand slap the casing, curse under his breath, try to shake life back into the bulb, but it didn't respond. The light popped once more and went dark for good. Only Navarro's dim, crooked beam was left, but that didn't last either. A few steps later, he clipped the edge of a broken beam and his head jerked sideways, the helmet lamp smashing into the rock wall and shattering instantly. The darkness slammed down like a curtain. "Shit, I can't see!" Navarro's voice cracked, high and close to panic. "I lost visual," Cole said, calm but blind, voice moving toward me. I froze in place and hissed, "Get back, both of you, now!" They obeyed, voices swallowed by the dark. I stood alone in the pitch-black tunnel, but to me it wasn't pitch black at all. The air was thick with the scent of sweat, steel, blood, and fur. I heard them before they came. One's heavy step, one snarl too low for human ears, and then claws scraping stone. The wolves were fast, but not faster than me. They charged together from opposite ends of the fork, thinking I'd flinch, thinking I'd hesitate in the dark like humans do. I didn't. The first one lunged high. I ducked under it, drove the silver tip of my boot up into its belly midair, then pivoted and slammed its skull against the wall with enough force to crack the stone. I didn't check to see if it was dead. I could hear the second coming from behind, already leaping. I dropped low, let it sail over me, and turned with speed it couldn't match, and leapt onto its back, jamming my knife straight down between its shoulder blades. It shrieked and twisted, trying to throw me off, but I held firm, wrapped my legs around its ribs, and twisted the blade until I felt the vertebra snap beneath me. It dropped, still twitching, and I drove my heel into its skull until the movement stopped. Behind me, I could hear Navarro breathing hard, Cole whispering to calm him down, telling him to keep his finger off the trigger. I stood in silence over the 2 twitching bodies, chest rising and falling with controlled rhythm, blood soaking into my coat from a fresh slash across my ribs that I hadn't noticed until the fight ended. I winced and touched it, deep, but not fatal. The hunger flared again, a steady pulse behind my teeth. I pushed it back like I always did, but not without lingering my gaze on Cole and Navarro for a beat too long. I grit my teeth. No. "You good?" Cole asked through the dark. I shook it off. Stay close to my back and don't drift. I moved forward, blood dripping from my knife, and the 2 of them followed like shadows behind a shadow. The path sloped downward again, this time steeper, broken rail ties underfoot making it harder to keep balance. Dust coated the air, and every breath tasted like ash and copper. I didn't tell them we were being herded. I didn't need to. They could feel it by now. The wolves weren't just attacking, they were trying to funnel us somewhere. The ground shook. Not a tremor, not a shift, but a collapse. The explosion came from above and behind. Maybe from one of the damaged supports we'd passed earlier. Maybe from a delayed chain reaction triggered by something else. I turned as the ceiling began to give way. Massive slabs of stone tore free, raining down in a roar of dust and steel. "Move!" I barked, grabbing Navarro and dragging him forward. Cole stumbled after us, coughing and covering his head. The corridor behind us was eaten by fallen debris. The tunnel we'd come through was gone. We didn't stop until the air grew cold again, the floor evening out into a large open cavern framed by the bones of long abandoned scaffolding and cracked metal catwalks. Up above, fractured shafts in the ceiling let in the faintest threads of daylight. Cold filtered through snow-choked vents. We had made it to the surface level, or close. But we weren't alone. I felt it before I heard it. The world went still, even my own breath holding back. Navarro took a half-step forward, his voice barely a whisper. "This is it, right?" I didn't answer. I wasn't looking up. From the far end of the cavern came a sound. Slow. Deliberate. The crunch of something massive walking without urgency. Heavy, patient, filled with certainty. The wolves had been strong, savage. This was something else. The Alpha wasn't just bigger. He was smarter. He hadn't shown himself yet because he didn't need to. He'd been waiting for this exact moment. When I was bleeding. When the soldiers were spent. When our escape path had narrowed to a funnel. And now he was coming. A growl pealed through the chamber, low and deep, vibrating the bones in my chest like a war drum struck from inside the earth. Cole chambered his last round. Navarro swallowed and stepped behind me. I shifted my grip on the knife and whispered, "Stay behind me." I wasn't leaving without finishing what I started. And I knew the Alpha didn't plan to let me leave at all. The chamber felt colder the moment he stepped out of the shadows. He didn't charge. He didn't snarl or posture like the others had. He simply walked into view, head low, shoulders broad enough to brush both sides of the passage. The fur along his arms and chest was streaked with gray and black like smoke stains on a snow-covered corpse. The claws on his hands weren't overgrown. They were filed. His eyes weren't wild, they were watching, judging, calculating. This wasn't a beast. This was a commander, the Alpha. With the threads of daylight coming through, Cole and Navarro could slightly see. I heard the subtle clicks of safety releases, the weight shift of two men who knew a last stand when they saw it. Cole had one round, Navarro had just a few. I stepped forward once, slow and even, my coat still dripping blood from the last fight. The Alpha looked me up and down and tilted his head.
"You stink of old blood."
I didn't answer. I reached for my pistols on instinct, but my belt was empty. Lost somewhere in the cave-in, I suspect. My fists clenched. Only the knife now. That and the silver-tipped boots I got. The Alpha chuckled low in his chest, the sound like thick gravel and syrup.
"You think that little blade saves you? I've split stronger things with one hand."
"I'm still standing," I said, rolling my shoulders and drawing the K-bar free. "That's one more than your friends." The smile vanished. He charged. I sidestepped, fast as lightning, and slashed across his arm. The blade bit deep. Silver burned, steam hissed, but it wasn't enough. He swung back, faster than something that size had any right to move. I ducked, but the edge of his claw caught my ribs, tore through coat and skin like paper. I staggered, twisted and kicked out, boot tip snapping forward into his thigh. It hit, it burned, and he howled. But again, it wasn't enough. He was already on me, claws hammering down. We traded blows in close quarters, me cutting, dodging, slashing low and fast, him battering and smashing with brute force. Every impact rattled bone. I drove the knife into his chest, and he grabbed my wrist, crushed in his grip, and flung me like a ragdoll into the cavern wall. The blade yanked out of him when I was thrown, It skidded away across the rock. The world spun. I hit hard and my shoulder cracked. I couldn't see straight. The Alpha was on me before I could move, claws pinning me down, teeth inches from my throat. My arms were pinned. I couldn't reach my boot, couldn't reach the blade. He leaned in close, and I could feel the heat of his breath.
I've killed your kind before, but none of them looked this scared.
The shot came like thunder, one sharp crack from the dark. The Alpha reeled back, a round tearing into his shoulder. Another followed, then another. I heard Navarro shouting, emptying the last few bullets of his rifle into the monster's back. The Alpha roared and twisted, torn between killing me and facing the new threat. It bought me seconds. Just enough. I moved on instinct. Pain flared up my side, but I forced my body to respond. I twisted free, wrapped my arms around his neck, and sank my fangs into his throat. The blood hit my tongue, hot, thick, and foul, sour with rage, corruption, and madness. I gagged, body convulsing, everything in me screaming to let go. I didn't want this. I didn't want to feed, not like this, not on a creature like him. I only drank what the outfit gave me, blood bags, sealed and sterile just enough to survive. I didn't feed on people, and I sure as hell didn't feed on monsters. The idea turned my stomach. But I was dying, and I knew it. So I drank. Every pull lit my veins on fire. Every drop mended something that had broken. My ribs snapped into place. My wounds sealed shut. The muscles surged with strength I hadn't felt in years. I grew faster, stronger, clearer. I could hear every rock settling, every breath in the room, every heartbeat, mine, Navarro, Cole's, even the Alpha's, hammering like thunder under my teeth as he tried to shake me off. He slammed me into the wall twice. I didn't let go. He screamed, a deep animal panic that told me this wasn't how he thought it would end. Not like this. Not by something like me. But it was already too late. His strength faltered, his stance broke. The blood in my system roared like fire in a vacuum, sharpening every nerve into a wire. I felt inhuman. I felt unstoppable. I felt wrong. Like something uncoiling inside me that I'd kept locked down for years finally had its say. I didn't care. I surged forward before the Alpha could recover, fist clenched, body humming with the Alpha's stolen power. My knife was gone, thrown during the chaos. It didn't matter. I didn't need it anymore. With a growl that wasn't entirely mine, I slammed a fist into the Alpha's chest. Flesh buckled. Bone cracked. He gasped. His eyes went wide. He tried to step back, but I was already in, hand driving through ribs, muscle, and organs. Hot blood poured down my arm. I grabbed hold of something pulsing and still beating and ripped it free in one savage jerk. The Alpha staggered. He looked at me, not with rage, but with a kind of awful understanding. His eyes held fear and defeat. Then he fell. The heart thudded once in my hand, then stopped. I dropped it to the stone. It hit with a wet slap that echoed through the silence. Behind me, neither of the soldiers said a word. They just stared as I stood there, soaked in blood that wasn't mine, trembling with power I hadn't asked for, hadn't wanted, and now couldn't fully ignore. The Alpha was dead, and I was still standing, but the cost hung heavy in my chest, because this was a line, and I'd just torn right through it. The chamber was silent. The Alpha's body lay twisted near the wall, chest torn open, steam rising faintly off his cooling corpse. I didn't move at first. My knuckles were soaked in blood to the elbow. The claws of what I'd become still curled around muscle and bone. Navarro stared like he wasn't sure I was done. Like maybe the thing that tore through the Alpha was still working its way out of me. I stepped away from the body without a word. My boots crunched on shattered rock, bones, and spent brass. Navarro shifted his weight. I could feel his unease, the adrenaline still thrumming in him, barely keeping him upright. Cole gave me a nod, curt and silent. They weren't glad I was there, but they were glad they weren't alone. We found the service shaft a few hundred yards beyond the cavern, behind a collapsed gate half swallowed by snow. We climbed in silence, the three of us moving slow but steady through the broken metal rungs and iced-over concrete. Navarro grunted once when his boots slipped, but I caught his elbow without thinking, held him up until he steadied, then let go. Light spilled through the cracks as we reached the top. Daylight, full and wide across the Colorado sky, snow glittering like crushed glass across the mountaintop. Normally I'd feel it by now, first on the cheeks, then the hands, the sting on my skin. But nothing came. No burn, no warning, just warmth. I hadn't felt the sun's warmth and comfort in quite a long time. The Alpha's blood was still burning through me, still giving me this power. It took away the pain of the sun, for the time being. Cole stepped out first, shielding his eyes. Navarro followed, blinking at the glare. I moved past them, squinting up at the sky, but not flinching. Not smoking, no pain. The snow fell soft and slow. In the distance, I heard the rhythmic thump of rotors as a black helicopter cut low across the trees. No markings, no transponder. Pure outfit. It circled once, then descended toward the clearing half a mile off, where the tree line broke near the old logging road. That was their ride. I didn't wait for the small talk, I just started walking. The soldiers followed behind. Navarro kept pace a few steps back, his rifle slung uselessly across his back now, with shoulders loose, but head still darting toward every sound in the woods. Cole caught up beside me just before we reached the clearing. He didn't say much, just gave me a side glance, then nodded. "You paved the way," he said. I didn't answer. "You didn't have to come in after us," Navarro added from behind. "I mean, well, you did, but you didn't." I kept walking. The helicopter blades were louder now, chopping up the silence, blowing snow and needles in every direction. The doors opened. Two techs in winter gear waved the soldiers forward. Cole gave me one last look, curious, maybe a little haunted. Navarro hesitated at the steps, then turned and looked me full in the face. "You're a monster, but I'll take a monster on my side next time." Then he was gone. The doors sealed. The chopper lifted into the morning sky, vanishing into the glare. I stood there for a long second, letting the wind settle. I pulled out my phone and thumbed in the message. Alpha dead. 2 survivors. Send cleanup. Send blood. I stood there watching the snow for maybe 10 seconds before the reply came in. Acknowledged. Your vehicle is waiting at drop point C. Keys in sun visor. Drive safe. I turned toward the forest and started walking. The trees thinned the farther I went. My boots sank into the snow, crunching through icy crust. My coat stiff with blood and ash and ripped in 4 places. I'd felt worse. But something about the way my body hummed, I didn't like it. The strength hadn't gone away. The speed, the clarity. I could still hear everything, the buzz of distant power lines, the far-off cracking of branches under snow. The Alpha's blood hadn't just healed me, it had filled me up, pushed past the normal limit. I could still feel it burning behind my eyes, stretching across every tendon and nerve like an infection I wasn't sure I could sweat out. And I hated how good it felt. I never drank like that, not from a kill, not from a monster. The outfit gave me bags. I took just enough. I lived lean. Anyways, I found my car parked at the edge of the road like they said. Black, armored, clean, steam rising off the hood in the cold. The keys were where they always were. I climbed into the driver's seat, blood drying under my collar, and let my head fall against the rest. I sat there for a while, watching the sky get brighter. I closed my eyes. The job was done, but I wasn't sure what I'd become to get it finished. I spoke quietly.
Call it a win if you want.
I just call it done.